Welcome to session 6 of our series on connection-based wellness. We have Joel Pukalo here from Family Life Psychology. Today, he's going to be talking about personal wellness in our lives, areas of reaching potential, developing our skills, and figuring out a way to mix our job allocation with our passions. So be sure to check out this video because if you're interested in wellness in this area of your life, you're not going to want to miss it. If you haven't checked out the introduction video to this series, you're going to want to make sure you go check that out before continuing on with this video or future videos of this series. The introduction is really going to help you in setting a base up for the topic that Joel's going to be discussing in this next session.
Welcome back to Connection-Based Wellness. Today we'll be focusing in on personal wellness. There are 3 main areas of personal wellness: reaching my potential, developing practical skills, and finding relational congruence. As you can imagine, we're all different as individuals. So this journey of personal wellness is unique to each one of us. The first area, though, that will be very similar to each of us is finding that sweet spot. We all have a sweet spot in life where we're able to use our skills and passions in a constructive manner to contribute to our sense of accomplishment and be able to make a positive difference in the world. For some of us, it might be parenting. It might be one of our sweet spots. I know I was just talking to one of my friends here about how, as a mom, she's just really passionate about being a mom, and she feels like that's one of her biggest sweet spots of using those gifts and talents and abilities to nurture her kids and help them to have a positive difference on the world. As a dad myself, I think that's probably my biggest sweet spot too. I enjoy my job. I've enjoyed coaching. I've done a lot of different things in my life, but I've never been so deeply impacted or finding my sweet spot as to mentor, support, and teach my children. It's just such a privilege and just so amazing. So if you're a parent, chances are your sweet spot is definitely partly in parenting. But there's definitely other parts of it as well. It might have to do with our vocation, what we do for a job, our volunteer time. Basically, it's just looking at those skills and areas of passions and combining them together to really do something that we find is personally meaningful. For myself, I've always felt like this call to help people. So growing up actually in high school, I either wanted to be a pastor or engineer or teacher. Those are pretty different fields, so I was kind of torn in a few different directions. And after high school, I actually ended up doing some Bible college, and then I went into engineering and really enjoyed that. And then of all things, recognized that I liked the math, but I really felt called to work with people. So I'm like, I don't think I'm supposed to be an engineer. And I was like, I honestly have no idea what I'm going to do. But my parents are both teachers and I like helping people. So I went into teaching. And now all of that's kind of blended in together to what I get to do these days in my life today. But I was understanding my skills and passions were really about helping people, connecting with people, supporting them in their journey, and finding both vocations, which I'm doing now in counseling, as well as volunteer opportunities and community groups and with my own family to use those skills and passions and live in my sweet spot at home, at work, and just in my free time as well. The other important part to reaching our potential is ongoing learning. Committing to being a lifelong learner is important, whether it be reading books, asking questions, listening to podcasts, finding practical ways to learn. Some of us learn best from life, just walking with people, learning from them, kind of right on that job training. That can be one of the best ways to learn. Sometimes we can learn things from YouTube videos these days or podcasts. I know my brother, he's a farmer. He's just an incredible guy. He has a purebred registered Semitol farm, and I get to be a little bit of a part of it. So neat to watch him, how he's learned so much about cows, and he can tell you all the genetics and the best genetics to mix and how to do AI and other parts of his farm just to get really high quality animals that will sell for the best prices. I am honestly quite clueless, but he has learned so much from, reading materials, talking to people, and learning from life. So it's really neat how he's learned in his field a lot just kind of on his own, where of course for myself, and being a psychologist, I've had to go through a lot of schooling, learn through a lot of textbooks. I learned through mentorship programs and other parts of my job as well. So we all learn in different ways. The key point or focus is being committed to always learning. Some people don't like books, so get an audiobook or learn from real life. But I always try to think, okay, what's one thing I can learn and grow from today in my life? And if we just take that simple mentality of what's one thing I can learn and grow today, we'll keep building that. And over the course of a year, we've learned 365 new things. So just that commitment and openness to learn, I think really helps all of us be at our potential, because people either think you've either arrived or you're still learning. And I think the greatest danger is to think we've arrived. And I've worked with people like that. It's miserable. When people think they know it all, they're terrible to work with. No one wants to work with them. And they actually limit themselves. They stunt their growth because they're not willing to learn new things. And I really believe we can learn from everyone. I have graduate students that I get to mentor and support, and I learn from them. I learn from my family members. I learn from kids. I learn from my own children, right? And people I've worked with. We are all on a learning journey, and there's no one in life that we can't learn from. Embracing that mentality and perspective is so powerful. And that really leads into having that research and development culture, being willing to try new things and make mistakes so we can grow and learn. No one knows it all. We can't do it perfectly. And one of my favorite stories is the company Apple Computers. I've got an iPad here. I may have an iPhone and iMac computer as well. I like Apple. But what I love most about Apple is a bit of their story. I don't know it well, so hopefully someone can get the precise details, but the general sense is, there was the fellow Steve Jobs, and from my understanding anyway, he didn't even wasn't able to finish through university. I'm not sure if he wasn't motivated or it just wasn't a fit for him at the time, and he didn't end up finishing. And after that, he was able to, I'm not sure, go back or at some point start Apple Computers. And Apple Computers, it was kind of an okay company, but it actually wasn't that successful. And it took some failures and some missteps and some hard stuff that they were refined and redesigned by a team of people. And Steve Jobs, and as we know it, Apple Computers now has become very successful. But it was a huge research and development culture and growing process. Similarly, I hear IBM Computers, I think it was in the 90s. Technology is really advancing and growing, and they had hired people. And this one person was hired, I guess, made this mistake that cost, I think it was a few $100,000, which was a lot of money at that time. And a couple of the bosses were talking and said, should we fire this person? And they said, fire them. We just invested all this money for them to make these mistakes. And part of their policy actually was people had to be willing to make mistakes, because they recognized, especially in technology at that time, the only way for people to learn and grow and for things to really evolve rapidly was people who had a research and development culture, mentality, or attitude where they were willing to make mistakes, learn and grow and find new ways of doing things. And I just think those are such important stories to think about in our lives. I think the biggest thing that holds us back is fear of thinking we have to have it perfect the first time, or whether it be if we're doing music or doing a writing project or whatever creative outlets we might have, building a car, constructing something, a house, whatever it might be. The biggest thing that holds us back is thinking we have to do it a certain way the first time. But if we gave ourselves permission to experiment, explore, try new things, learn and grow, that really is at the essence and core of reaching our potential. It's one thing to find your sweet spot, to know your skills and passions, but really getting to that sweet spot involves ongoing learning and this commitment to be willing to make mistakes so you can get better and grow. Tied into that kind of growth mindset and mentality is this idea of developing practical skills. Goal setting is very important. A plan without a goal and kind of things mapped out is just wishful thinking. And a lot of us, we live in the realm of wishful thinking. We have ideas, we have plans, we have goals, we have dreams, but because we haven't made a timeline or mapped that out, we're still in the wishful thinking phase. So very practically, the first thing we can do is daily time management, creating kind of daily systems to manage time and prioritize the most important tasks in our life and avoid multitasking. I got to say, I'm a big multitasker. I often multitask on a lot of different things. Sometimes it can be okay, but it can also be very draining in our energy. So one thing I do to start every day is I ask myself, what are the top 3 things that I need to do today? What are the most important 1 to 3 things that have to be done today? The rest, maybe they're priority 2s or not as important. I can do them at some other time, but these are the most important things that are must-dos today. And kind of coming from that mindset, sometimes people really enjoy writing to-do lists because it kind of helps them map some of these ideas out too. And people really enjoy being able to cross things off to-do lists. That kind of feels pretty good as well. But sometimes when we write to-do lists, we have all these different expectations and it's like too much. We have way too much going on. So even if you have a to-do list and you have things written down, let's dial down the expectations and only have 3 things you got to cross off that day. Or maybe if you're having a hard time or it's a more challenging season, even 1 or 2 things. Starting small, just getting 1 or 2 things accomplished each day can be helpful. And tied in with that idea is limiting time wasters. Sometimes we spend time on unproductive activities. I know sometimes we get distracted by our phones or social media or other things that go on during the day, even good things like our kids or other things. So wherever you might find you're working and trying to focus these days, recognize what those distractions are and just kind of game plan around some ways that you can minimize some of those distractions. Sometimes I have to work outside of my house if I'm working on a writing project or just needing my full attention to something. So that way other people aren't interrupting what I'm doing at the time. I'll turn off my phone or put it on silence and take away my access from any other distractions that I can do just to get that one thing done. So that can be helpful. And the other piece is weekly planning. As a person who actually has a hard time organizing and scheduling my life, I have ADHD inattentive type, which actually makes it very hard for me to remember things. You can ask my wife, I often leave the house forgetting one or two things. My brain is quite scattered, to be honest with you. And because of that, I have to work extra hard at scheduling and organization. So the night before, I pack everything that I need to have packed for the next day so I remember. And I have a very clear schedule. I actually used to have a couple of schedules. And the problem was when I had two schedules, one on paper or two online, I would over and double book myself. So I've decided to just really simplify things, only have one schedule. Literally every single appointment or every single thing I have to do is in that schedule so I remember. Kind of a funny story that happened to me a couple months ago was I had scheduled an appointment for something, but I didn't write down what it was. And I was literally racking my brain for a couple of days trying to figure out what I was supposed to do at 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Thankfully, I figured it out on Monday, but I was a little concerned about it. So having a schedule and writing things out and planning our week is important. I think one thing for all of us is we wish we had more time. I know for me, sometimes I'm too optimistic on time and I think I can do it all. And I don't have very realistic expectations when it comes to time and overcommit myself. So thankfully, with the support of my wife, I'm trying to set more realistic expectations and having a very clear time parameters as to which time I'm booking off and reserving for family. So that's kind of the first thing that goes into my schedule. And then from whatever's left of that, maybe there's some extra time in the evenings I might have to do some other activities, especially volunteer and supporting people in the community. But prioritizing those most important times and blocking out those important things, whether it be like family time or recharge time, exercise time, whatever those things are. Because if you think about a jar, if you have a bunch of big rocks, if you put the big rocks in first and pour sand in, the sand will just fill in the jar wherever the big rocks allow it to. But if you take a jar and fill it with sand and try to stuff some rocks in the jar, they are not going to fit well. You're not going to be able to put the rocks in the jar once the sand is in there. So the rocks, of course, are the most important things in our lives. Prioritizing those and starting with those. And then the sand, the rest of the activities, kids, snacks, and getting them to activities and all the other just small details and scheduling details of the day, the sand just fills in. And pretty soon the night's gone and whoa, the whole week is gone, right? So recognizing putting the big rocks in first is very key, and then allowing whatever else to fill that time. If you're not intentional about the big rocks, the most important things, sand will just fill that schedule. And that's where setting yearly goals is really helpful too. So I actually set yearly goals in all 7 areas, 7 pillars of connected wellness, and try to set a goal for my physical health, which is not going very well this year. I got to work on that one. My mental health, emotional, spiritual, etc. So setting goals, small goals in all 7 areas of just how I hope to grow this year. It's not like I'm expecting myself to do perfectly in all of those areas, but just having growth goals and growth perspectives of how I can just get a little bit better than last year really helps me to stay focused and keep growing in my wellness as a person. The final area, which is probably could be a session in itself, is managing finances. So of course, money in life doesn't make you happy, but it sure does decrease stress if you have finances managed and understood. And the funny thing about money is it doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. I think all of us, we get stressed about money. I was just talking to my wife last week, and there's times in our lives where we literally had nothing. We had no money. Life was stressful. Thankfully, we're fortunate to have a bit more money now. But I'm still stressed because I like to have plans around it. So we're just talking about trying to actually have a budget to be a bit more clear about our finances and what's important to us. So money is always one of those topics that if you are married or you share money with someone else, it's important to be on the same page with them. And if it's just you, it's also important to be on the same page. And one thing I really believe in, there's this guy, Dave Ramsey, I'm sure we can mention him on the link as well. He has whole programs and teachings, and he's helped a lot of people manage their money really well. But he says one thing, though, which I really like. He talks about saving, giving, and spending. So having certain percentages or amounts that you're allotting to each of those areas, and start with a saving. He said if you're not saving, you're going to be in trouble because surprises will come up and you'll have no money and you'll be in debt. So starting with that saving and deciding no matter how much money you make or how little money you make, deciding what percentage of money each month that you can save. Giving is so powerful. You don't have to give a lot of money, but the idea of being generous and giving actually helps us to be grateful. It helps us to be thankful. And it also helps us to feel like we're making an important, significant difference in the lives of others. It's just so bizarre, but I know people who have a faith perspective and don't have a faith perspective, and they're generous. And it seems like the more generous a person is, somehow the more successful and the more money they end up happening. And not all of them are maybe super rich, but they're wealthy. They're truly in their lives and in managing their finances and their lifestyle, living well, and they're in a place of wellness. So there's something about generosity, no matter how small or little, that's really key. And of course, budgeting and understanding how much our spending is as well. There's small practical things. Sometimes we're spending more than we're making, or spending is just too big, and finding small ways to size that down. Dave Ramsey goes into great detail about that, so check the link for that. But I don't want to overemphasize the importance of money, but if you think about wellness and mental, emotional, physical health, if you don't have to worry about money, it frees you up to really focus on wellness. But if a person doesn't have their basic needs met in terms of finances and food and things like that, it's actually really hard to be emotionally well. So if you're struggling with the area of finances, I would encourage you to find some resources or seek out some supports to really understand that area. Because if you can kind of get a plan in place there, then it will help you create more capacity to grow in different function aspects of wellness that we've talked about as well. So as we work on developing our finances, it really helps free us up to develop other areas of practical skills, and it really supports that area of reaching our potential as well. If we don't have to worry and think about finances, we can focus on that ongoing learning and focus more on finding our sweet spot in life. And in that sweet spot, it's always nice when that sweet spot overlaps with our vocational congruence. So understanding what our strengths are, our passions and interests, and our desired quality of life. And this ties into finances as well. Of course, if you want to make, let's say, have a huge house and have tons of expensive cars, you probably need to find a job that's going to support that, right? But there's some people who really want to live very simply, and quality of life and just being able to enjoy life every day and work less and connect more with people. If that's your purpose, then you've got to find a job that would match that. The first person might be really good at working 60 or 70 hours a week, owning their own business and being very busy and really trying to build something big, where the second person who wants a more chill or relaxed quality of life would probably not thrive at all owning a business where they had to work 60, 70 hours a week and we're building something. So just understanding what your quality of life is and finding a vocation that matches that can be really helpful. And then mapping that in. There's the kind of this convergence or overlap with strengths, passions, and quality of life. If you can figure out how to find a job that overlaps with your strengths, with your passions, and with that quality of life, you're probably going to enjoy going to work. But if you have a job, where it doesn't really match with your strengths, then work's going to be frustrating. You might have a job, like for me, being an accountant or engineer. I'm pretty good at math, so that works with my strengths. But I'm actually not passionate about numbers or things like that. So I could have a job that would match my strengths. It would give me a good quality of life, but because the passion is not there, I'm not really enjoying it. I'm not really thriving. I can't fully be at a place of personal wellness in my own life. And that's where we're all different. Some people love accountants. I've got some great friends who are accountants, engineers. They love it. They do amazing work. So the key for each one of us is figuring out what our passions are and how we can find a way to overlap them with our strengths and with our quality of life. I love music, but I'm not a very good musician. So I'm passionate about music, but if I tried to make a living out of it, I'm not good at it, so I don't have strengths in it, and I could not have the quality of life that my family would need if I was a musician, because I'm a bad one. So really understanding the difference too. Sometimes we have passions, but we can't actually work as a job in those because it might not be our strength and might not support our quality of life. Of course, there's many things that fit our sweet spot that are outside of the 9 to 5 or outside of the job that we'll do or the vocation we'll have in our life that there's volunteer opportunities in many aspects of life, like we talked about with our families, with our friends, with our volunteer, and also with work, where we can fit them all into our sweet spot. But really understanding ourselves, whether it's further exploring just our personality and understanding the way we tick and the way we work can be helpful, really in that area of personal wellness. It really is so unique to each one of us. So focusing in on our unique preferences, our passions, our skills, our interests, and kind of tailoring our life in terms of what we do for work, in our family life, in our friend life, and in our organizational life and practical skills to what will be a fit for us personally. The more you can learn and grow about yourself, that understanding enables you to figure out what personal wellness looks like for each one of us. So I just encourage you, reach out if you want to talk to friends. There's also professional supports that would be available to learn a bit more and explore a bit more about yourself. And as you journey on that self-discovery, you'll be more equipped to really be able to live from a place of personal wellness as well.
Thank you for watching this video in part of our series talking about personal wellness. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you're working with your team at this point in working towards wellness in these areas of your lives. In the next video of this series, Joel's going to be talking about emotional wellness in our lives, and he's going to be giving us tips and strategies towards that. So be sure to subscribe because you're not going to want to miss it.